and welcome to another Wrestling Roundtable Discussion podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by Michael Sidgwick and Andy Murray from WhatCulture to discuss one burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes or Spotify for daily podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, we have interviews, we have more roundtable discussions, and we have a round of the week complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on wrestle culture. But gents, it's a new year. And the one thing I want to ask you is what are the changes WWE have to make in 2019?
Right. I'll go first. I'm going to get annoyed throughout the course of this podcast.
Ask about that.
Just remembering the stuff that is terrible that we want to fix, hence the topic. So I've got an avocado stress ball given to me during Secret Santa.
By Ronda Rousey.
Now, it's the perfect stress ball for a cook millennial like myself, because what is the ultimate safe space? It's an avocado, of course. So I'm going to squeeze this when I get annoyed. Now, I'm going to get annoyed instantly.
Squeezing it already, mate.
Wow.
Look at squeezing it already. Look at the bulge, man.
The bulge on that. It's the only time anyone's ever said that to me.
Bulging like Finn
So
Balor.
thank you very much for that. Now, the recent sad death of Mean Gene Okerlund, who, we should say it now, is just the best ever in his capacity, I think, just brought into focus to me like how little actual personality there is in WWE right now outside of the ring. I grew up on the golden era, mid to late 80s. I got all the VHS tapes. That was my jam. That's what got us into this thing. And we had Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan on commentary. We had Howard Finkel doing ring announcing duties. And we had Mean Gene Okerlund in the backstage interviewer role. And they all had such personality and such gravitas. They all, in their own way, made it feel witty and more to the point, they made it feel like big time. And we just don't get that anymore. We've got Michael Cole, who's a robot. We've got Tom Phillips, who is a robot with even less personality, as functional as he is in that role. Like JoJo is an announcer, does nothing for me.
Nope.
Like the backstage interviewers, now that Renee Young has been put into the desk, do nothing for me.
Oh, yeah.
I would honestly say the only person in that company right now, main roster, who even matches the brilliance of that foursome is... what's the ring announcer? Greg Hamilton. He is incredible at orchestrating that big fight feel. But beyond that, I just feel like they're a bunch of bland, good-looking robots.
Yeah, particularly with regards to these broadcaster types. Even Renee Young, they've turned her into the Stepford wife character.
She was really good.
I know, she was such a good host, especially on Talking Smack and stuff like that. And now she's just this horrible scripted monster. But you make a really good point there with Mean Gene. Can you imagine, like, I don't know, pick a random interviewer, Dasha Fuentes, like, backstage. Imagine the SummerSlam sign falls on her head. How she reacts.
No, she wouldn't react. She's
not
a robot.
popping the boys, that's for sure. But it was things that he used to do, like, you know, when a heel was talking rubbish, he'd, like, put his little hand over his mouth and look to the camera like, I'm pretty sure that guy's talking bollocks. It's... little things like that, you just miss them. It makes it so sanitized and heartless.
Had so many... to the point of absurdity, like outlandish characters, like you got Tugboat, Saba Simba, and all like these ridiculously colourful, larger-than-life characters. And yet, when Mean Gene Okerlund, with his like proper like sports broadcaster feel, put a microphone in their face, you could somehow believe it, that this was like a real thing. And it's not just the personality, but the whole setup of like a pre-match interview. It felt like a Sky Sports thing where they're talking to a manager to discuss tactics. It felt real. It felt more real now when you had Tugboat than with like the real named wrestlers you get now. So they really should bring back a sense of gravitas to these roles that they just treat as like, just give them like bland, good-looking robots.
One thing I was going to say when we were thinking about this is related to that. It's just purely, even if you keep the backstage interviewers and the announcers, the ring announcers the same, they need some sort of change in commentary because it is an absolute mess. I realise a lot of the time we talk about how the wrestling is better in NXT, but the commentary is better in NXT because some people some people may not like it in for certain reasons, but at least there's a reason. At least there's some personality there.
Yeah.
Some people, yes, get annoyed with the three in NXT for a variety of reasons, and you may not like the fact that you've got catchphrases and things like that. But as someone who grew up in the 90s with obviously, you know, JR, the King, when the King...
Well, he was a good pervert and not a bad pervert.
And they even had, you know, the likes of Taz and Michael Cole on SmackDown who just played well off each other.
Paul Heyman.
Paul Heyman, of course. You had people who at least stuck their neck out a little bit and didn't just stay within these lanes that they were given and the words that they're given in their ear. And it's one of the worst things about WWE nowadays. It really puts me on.
I have a feeling, here's it again, sorry, that we're basically just going to say, just get rid of Vince McMahon after every single point. Carry on.
I think we are, because it is the production that's the problem. I think we can all agree on that, because like the show I always go back to is the UK title tournament January 2017 when Michael Cole and Nigel McGuinness were doing commentary, and Michael Cole had a few cheesy moments, as he always does, but other than that, he was tremendous. He called the matches and put moves over and told this story, and it was really good. And then the next night, he's on Raw, and he's going all these pre-bottled advertisements and catchphrases, like he's trying to have his bloody Miracle on Bourbon Street moment again on a Monday night as Elias wrestles Baron Corbin in 20 minutes of piss. It's just, they really need to do something about it. And Corey Graves, I think, is a really good, thank you, Michael, is a really good example of a guy, and a guy who shows what happens when these people are taken from NXT and moved to the main roster, because he genuinely came off really witty at times in NXT, and on the main roster he feels like a try-hard Bobby Heenan clone, and it's really cringeworthy, especially when he tries to tussle with Becky Lynch on Twitter.
What I mean when I say NXT commentary is better is I like, you know, Maranello. I like some of his crowbarred-in phrases, but I realise that maybe instead of having that, you know, once in a while on a takeover, if I had that every week, that may wear thin very quickly. I'm not saying that we need to go to that end of the scale, but I just think more freedom, more creativity, and
like less restrictions.
For God's sake, just define what Renee Young's role is in terms of, right, how much do you know about this whole Dean Ambrose thing? Because it's an absolute nightmare when that happens. There's a microcosm for how unaware we just have to move on from that later on. But then also in the moment of Dean Ambrose, she has to act like, well, he doesn't say anything to me about it. Ridiculous. Andy Murray, what else would you like to change in WWE?
This is a very big ask, but I would love to see WWE come up with a way to book a long-term feud that doesn't just rely on 700 rematches in a row, because every single bloody feud on Raw and SmackDown's a good show, but they are killing their high-level programs by just booking guys on pay-per-views, pay-per-view with no creativity. Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles, right? Phenomenal match the other month. Great stuff. Now we get to this week's SmackDown. They have a number one contenders match. Who wins? Oh, it's AJ Styles. I'm sure the Royal Rumble match will be tremendous. I'm sure I will love it in the moment, but I do not care. I've just seen these guys wrestle. Let them move away. Let them do something else. If you want to come back to it in a couple of months, once the characters have had time to evolve. Not just because AJ Styles has punched Vince McMahon in the face, suddenly he's a different person. It's absurd, and it's just a real lack of creativity, because New Japan, like, people hate when we compare WWE and New Japan, but this is relevant because New Japan booked loads of rematches all year long. Several pay-per-views will have the same rivalries. I think it was 2017 where Dominion and Wrestle Kingdom, the two big pay-per-views of the year, were essentially the same card. But the way they'd filled that time between these two rematches really made the difference. People went away and did something else. They feuded with other people. They came back having changed, and it was a big payoff. In WWE, it's just like, we got another pay-per-view in 3 weeks, so let's just book them and have them cut promos on each other for a month.
It feels now that, again, this company is so allergic to fundamental change that's so desperately needed that, in a sense, we've just stretched the formula by 1 week. Instead of getting an automatic title rematch, we're getting, all right, okay, here's a number one contenders match with the same opponent coming out. They've just added a week to it with what amounts to a meaningless match, which is always good. That multi-man match on SmackDown this week was
bags of fun.
Yeah, bags and bags of fun. But again, it's just a longer means to the same end, which for me is a bandage.
To sort of continue that point as well, one thing I'd say is, you know, we've reduced the number of pay-per-views. Obviously, we saw when we had the brand split, and there was just so many pay-per-views to keep up with. Now there's less. There's around sort of one a month for WWE, which is still a lot. But the reduction in number is arguably helpful for storylines and things like that, and for fans to be able to be built up rather than it seeing a 2-3 week build for what is meant to be this huge match you're really anticipating. But I'd like a lot more definitive finishes on the B-level pay-per-views. I get it that we want to build to big dramatic moments at Survivor Series and at the Royal Rumble and at SummerSlam and obviously at WrestleMania, but I also don't feel that they have to trade off, as a result of that, definitive closing finishes or definitive closing moments of pay-per-views. The amount of pay-per-views last year that I left going, oh, is that it? Oh, it's a double count out.
Yeah, he's
right?
kicked him in the willy.
Yeah, it was so frustrating as a fan. And yes, it's not as bad as the old days where you'd think, hang on, I've paid 30 quid for this. But even so, I just want the product to make more sense. And you can't tell me that with 4 or 5 weeks between pay-per-views, you couldn't just have a definitive end to this feud and then build up another contender here and simultaneously be building someone underneath. It's just a lot more forward planning, I think.
Yeah. Again, you'll catch heat in the comments section for saying this, but New Japan Pro Wrestling, right? Subjective taste aside, if you look at the audience reactions, and more to the point, listen to those audience reactions, there are so many more over acts in New Japan than there are in WWE right now. That is an audible, objective fact. Yet, there are next to no screwy finishes on major New Japan Pro Wrestling matches, like next to none whatsoever. Those wrestlers get over in defeat by being booked to look incredibly competitive and to let them reach their creative potential as in-ring performers. You can get over more in defeat in New Japan Pro Wrestling than you can getting a tainted win in WWE right now. Well, there's a lesson there. There really is a lesson there.
Good example of that. The one of the American shows New Japan held last year, Jay White and Juice Robinson. Juice Robinson wins the IWGP United States title. The JR falling off his chair match, the big banner match.
Yeah.
Jay White, in that moment, he lost his title, he was dethroned, whatever. It was this big cathartic babyface thing, but that was the first time he really felt like a genuine, big, heelish Brit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a great example of a guy getting over in defeat. WWE, for whatever reason, either don't want to do that or don't know how to do that. It's frustrating. It's a different product. They try and distance themselves from wrestling as much as possible. But I totally agree.
The worst thing about this is that WWE could have killed your stone and your stone, your bird with one stone, if they had just booked Daniel Bryan versus Mustafa Ali at the Royal Rumble instead of yet another AJ Styles match, because we're not even including the SmackDown matches they've had. We could have a fresh match with an intriguing dynamic where no one would have really expected Mustafa Ali to win, but if he had gone 20 minutes and taken Daniel Bryan to the limit, he could have really opened some eyes.
100%.
In a one-off match that could have done so much for Daniel Bryan, so much for Mustafa Ali, create a fresh match for the audience, which is apparently what they said they're going to do, and they just don't have the balls to do it.
And the setup was right there. That's the frustrating thing.
What's he lost for now?
I know, he pins him in a tag match. It's perfect.
And you can even use the partial injury of, like, you're unsafe, you're trying to, take me out, etc. Not as painting him as a heel, but painting more Daniel Bryan as not. We've had a lot of whiny, moany little bitches on WWE for a while when they're champion who say, "Oh well, the Seth Rollins is the obvious one. Do you think of from a few years ago?" But you could have utilised that perfectly because all the fans knew, all the more knowledgeable fans, let's just say, rather than using the obvious term, the educated fans knew about that slight botch. They're fine. It's not the end of the world. And the other ones, you can just really ham it up, really build up what was clearly an accident, and just make Daniel Bryan come across as even more of a
like sanctimonious guy who could have said something along the lines of, I've got like head issues throughout my career, and you've aimed that 450 in my head and not my stomach because you wanted to end my career to advance yours. This is the sort of storytelling that long-term fans often implore WWE to do, because we've been watching it for years. We know what makes good drama. I'm not saying I'm more qualified than a WWE creative writer, but I bloody am. We've just plucked this out of our arsehole. Like within minutes, and it's like an intriguing slant to a match that they really could have done at the Rumble, because the two Rumbles sell the event more so than any WWE Championship match.
We talked about this a lot in the past about how you just put someone in fans kind of know probably isn't going to win, but you get an exciting match with the likes of Ziggler. Rey Mysterio was used years ago as well in matches against Edge, and it's an open goal, really, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's the perfect term for it, an open goal, and yet we've got another rematch. It'll be great, but you want to anticipate these things weeks in advance, not just when the night rolls around. All right, okay, crack open a beer, this one's going to be good.
Now, one thing I want to talk about now, one of my changes that I want them to make in 2019, we were talking more about big changes, landmark changes in WWE here. I'm going to be a little bit more selfish and talk about one person that they need to completely change the way they were. No, don't worry. I'm not going to do that. I'm trying to be good in 2019. We'll start off well. You talked about looking good in defeat, and there's someone who's looked incredible in defeat, almost to his own detriment on SmackDown Live, and it's someone who I am desperate for them to push at the start of 2019, and that is Andrade Cien Almas. We know what he can do. We saw what he could do in NXT, and I love watching his matches. I think he's phenomenal to watch, whoever he's against, and I just feel like you were covering it for a while. You're doing SmackDown ups and downs.
I do
for
every
the website.
single week, baby.
I remember you and I talking every week about how he wasn't even being featured.
Yeah, well, I used to do a cheeky little thing on that article.
It was wildly popular as well.
It kind of was. Some people didn't like it. Comment section. I did a little thing called the Andrade Almas box score, which was a number of little statistics, but it was like number of days since he debuted on the main roster, number of days since he last won, number of wins since joining the main roster, and I think I was up to something like 8 months and 3 singles wins, 2 of which were against full-time wrestlers, something like that. It really is like a pathetic usage of a world-class talent, and it's not the simple internet case of, they're not pushing my favourites, it's a disgrace. This is a tremendous... Him and Zelina Vega is a tremendous act.
It's a tremendous sports entertainment act. He's not just a good wrestler.
Exactly. He can wrestle. He can have this 5-star match with Johnny Gargano and TakeOver. That doesn't mean as much on the main roster. Fine. But he's got Zelina Vega, this wonderful talker, who they want to turn into a bloody wrestler instead of a valet.
Can't wrestle not very well at all.
Very good, brother. It's insane that they seemingly see her as a potential wrestler and him as just this weird jobber to the stars. Yeah.
It's literally backwards, man. It is quite literally backwards, that company.
It's horrific. And it's together they are a really three-dimensional act. They are a main event caliber act. And yet, he's really good at losing, as you've just said. So here he is, jobber to the stars.
His moveset is thrilling to watch as well. If you're tired of the main roster, if you're tired of by the numbers, this move, then miss this move, and if it's a cruiserweight match, you might get a Spanish fly in there. People are tired of that. You look at the stuff that he does the knees in the corner, the acrobatics that he can do, that spinning elbow that he hits. It's brutal.
The head, by all rights, should come off. And it's not just the moveset for me, because on the face of it, it's almost too spectacular for a heel, because how can you hate that when it's so explosive and so entertaining? But the way he times his cut-offs is sudden, dramatic. He just makes you want to get behind the babyface all the more because he cuts them off at the perfect times. He edges people. It's a bit of a... Look at that face, man. He knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, I just really want him to get pushed in 2019 out of arguably everyone. Yeah. I think he's one of the most overlooked.
It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of unnecessary hard work at this point.
I think there's a wider point to be made there as well, and this is certainly something I would like to see changed in general. And again, this is a big ask and blah blah blah. They need to start taking better care of these wrestlers who just don't do anything. So, like, we're all hyped on Mustafa Ali and stuff, but we know fine, in 4 weeks, he's going to be doing nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Guys like The Revival, classic example. It was Cesaro back in the day. There was this clamour. I don't necessarily think Cesaro would have made them any money as a main eventer, but world-class wrestler, kind of doing nothing. He's found his niche now, fair enough, as a tag wrestler. But with All Elite Wrestling coming up and all the money they have behind that, they're obviously not going to threaten WWE and put them out of business, but wrestlers are going to have their head turned by this. If your contract's coming up this summer and you see Cody and the Young Bucks dangling these big cherries saying, we're going to hire you as employees, not as independent contractors. You can have health benefits, you can have this, and we're going to book you. You're going to wrestle. We're going to put you in programs that are going to make sense, and you're going to feel creatively fulfilled. Now, maybe we can't offer you as much money as Vince McMahon, but we'll offer you something comparable, and you'll have all this job satisfaction. Is that not going to sound really appealing to guys like the Revival, who are just kind of sitting around as patsies in this terrible tag division on Raw?
Gauged by their Twitter, they must be like, they are pissed off. Like, that's not work. No. You can actually see there's a seething tone behind those tweets, and all you have to do is look at All In. A card, like the total range of that card was astonishing. You had like an old school NWA title match, you had a brutal hardcore match, you had like state of the art athletic exhibitions in the main event, you had like a really modern update on like a vicious babyface versus heel match in Kenny Omega and Pentagon Jr. Basically, what I'm getting at is that All In, which a lot of people wrote off as this big like indie show and like apparently this like indie genre which doesn't exist, but people wrote it off as such. There was literally all things for all men on that card, and that if I was a pro wrestler, I would look at that card and think, Jesus Christ, if I go to All Elite Wrestling, they can do something for my act. As opposed to being a tag team.
Yeah. 100%.
You get absolutely nothing in WWE.
And you just look at recent signs like Ty Dillinger tweeting, hey, remember when I used to wrestle? And Grand Metalik tweeted something the other day where it was like a poll, it was CMLL or the Indies. And it's like, it's like, okay, Grand Metalik is not a big loss to WWE, but he could be something.
He's an asset somewhere else because he's outstanding. Wrestler. You wouldn't know it like.
Yeah, and this is the complaint that a lot of people make, like, oh, so what if he's a jobber, he's a lower mid-carder, and it's like, well, yeah, but that's only because how they've booked him. Like, he can't help his presentation in that particular company. If he could be there somewhere else and get over on his wrestling skills.
One company's trash could be AEW's treasure.
Exactly. We look at literally at Cody Rhodes. When he left, no one was going, we need to keep Cody Rhodes around
Juice
here.
Robinson, CJ Parker, done.
What other changes did WWE need to make in 2019?
Well, again, following on from the discussion of All Elite Wrestling, which, by all accounts, considering Cody Rhodes tweeted, "This is for the fans," the Young Bucks tweeted, "We cannot do this without you." They are going to gear their product to what the consumer wants, because that's how most businesses operate that aren't in this ridiculous 99% monopoly that WWE found itself in. Can we use past tense at this point? It's probably too early. But
a little bit.
Last year, in particular, this really brought home to me like yet another age-old thing that this company has never been able to shake, but might actually have to soon, is that they are obsessed with pushing their own guys. They've booked acts from other organizations very effectively in the past. Obviously, Steve Austin got his start in the mainstream in WCW. So did Triple H, so did The Undertaker. But because they weren't so synonymous with them, Vince wasn't put off, and he gave them every chance to succeed. If you contrast those guys with the likes of Sting, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, who were like so like they were synonymous with the NWA or WCW, that Vince sort of looked at them as an outsider, someone who he couldn't in good conscience promote as one of his guys because it wouldn't speak to his, unimpeachable genius that he likes to brag about, because the accusation would always be Goldberg, Diamond Dallas Page, like, go back years for this sort of thing. The accusation would be, well, you've just taken, it wouldn't serve his ego to push guys who he didn't create, and that's an inarguable fact. This is happening again, as everything in WWE happens over and over again. If you look who they pushed as flagship guys, with AJ Styles being the rule-proven exception that Ric Flair was in 1992 and 1993. Roman Reigns literally never appeared on the indie circuit. He was an FCW signature right off the back at the turn of this decade. Braun Strowman, Performance Center graduate. They almost screwed her up, but she's done so well to transcend the terrible myopic booking. Charlotte Flair was another one. And now all the big rumours now are swirling around the major push Lars Sullivan is set to get. Lars Sullivan, yet again, never been on the independent scene. He's a WWE signee. Another guy who is the worst example yet, because all of those performers have got merit. This one doesn't. Baron Corbin never wrestled an indie show. He was a WWE signee straight from the sporting arena. All of these people got pushed, some of whom way beyond how over they were or how talented they were, just because Vince McMahon liked them. And one of the reasons why he liked them so much beyond their look is the fact that he could reasonably call them WWE guys. And I do not want to see Baron Corbin in such a featured role on my television ever again, because he is absolutely useless.
And
he's not useless. He could be in a tag team.
Yeah, and it'd just be a stooge in a tag team.
He could be a stooge in a tag team. He's got a decent verbal delivery. I don't want to bury the guy too much because he's got a decent mic game, and some of his stuff looks really quite good in the ring, some of it. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you've got competition breathing down your neck, which is legit geared towards what the fans want to see, maybe, just maybe, the response to that shouldn't be push the guys Vince wants to push because they're his own, because they're his. Like, it's just, it reached almost an idea with the Baron Corbin stuff, like, so
they
bad.
had to openly admit to it, basically, on television, didn't they? That was it.
Yeah.
It was
Hold hands.
terrible.
Like, Baron Corbin's run in 2018 was so bad.
Russo-esque.
So he's the micro example of a wider macro mentality that I need to see come to an end.
One final change I want to suggest that WWE makes in 2019 is the use of NXT. This kind of works both ways. We've made the point on several occasions that they need to work out what they're going to do with someone before they bring them up from NXT, rather than just sort of having a big, dramatic entrance or dramatic debut and then thinking, right, 4 weeks down the line, what we're going to do with them. But it also works opposite ways. And I'm not saying send people back to NXT to get retrained, Nia Jax, but I'm talking about sending people back to NXT if they're not being utilised. We've seen it with Tyler Breeze. We saw it in the earlier days of NXT with the likes of, Cesaro, or anyone, people being sent back to just elevate, facing someone like that who they're not really utilising is beneficial for NXT, and it's also beneficial for the rest of because it's getting some sort of airtime then at least.
Yes.
I agree and disagree with that point.
Same
I think it's a great thing for guys like Tyler Breeze or Fandango or whoever, who are clearly talented, Ty Dillinger, as you've just mentioned. But what we have, unfortunately, at the moment with NXT is a massive roster bloat as well. You have a guy like Donovan Dijak, who I believe is now Dominic Dijakovic, one of the hottest wrestlers on the indie scene when he signed. He was on the sidelines for a year and a half. They booked him twice. He was a jobber. He's only just making TV now. All these people sitting, waiting for a chance. Keith Lee, one of the big indie phenoms over the past few years, they don't know what to do with him because they got so much going on. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see people get the opportunity to go back down there and be creatively fulfilled again. But I think if they're going to do that, unfortunately, they need to make it a 2-hour show. And I don't know if I can consume a 2-hour show, brother.
Please, no. We've already got more than
They've
enough.
just got so many guys. Like Marcel Bartel's another one. Big star in WXW in Germany. Second generation, might even be third generation. Big star back there. He's only now just breaking through, and he's on NXT UK, a show nobody watches. They've got too many wrestlers in that bloody performance center. But that's only going to get worse now. They're signing everyone and letting nobody go.
Yeah, and in addition to that, as much as it would benefit the performers and fans in the short term, it's still a short-term fix because what you've got with a sort of cyclical system there, no matter how much I've lobbied it for in the past, you've still got, basically, irrespective of whether the home brand is NXT or the home brand is main roster, you've still got people who, under Triple H's creative direction, are going to look great.
Yeah.
And under Triple H's creative direction are going to look like absolute jabronis, like absolute nobodies.
Under Vince McMahon, sorry.
Yeah, under Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
So it just feels like, you go to Triple H for a few weeks, it can be over, but back to Vince and you're nothing.
So just to sum up, overall, the one big change that WWE needs to make in 2019...
Just get rid of Vince.
Yeah, bin him off.
Now, there is an actual... We've been saying this for years, and he still knocks some stuff out the park, right? He does. But I don't think there's been genuinely a better opportunity to sack him off, because not only is the creative putrid, but he's got, in George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, a pair of really high-ranking management figures who did the vast majority of the TV negotiations this time around, which has netted them billions of dollars. Like, the business has never been in better hands, and the creative's never been in worse. Vince McMahon is kind of like, as I've called him in an article before, like the kind of demented old Ronald McDonald of this organisation, who honestly is... This company's success at this point, I can say, is almost entirely incidental to him.
To play devil's advocate, if you're on the creative team, people moan about it all the time. We've been guilty of doing it. But if you write a show, if you spend your week crafting this show and thinking, right, okay, what do people want to see? Oh, we'll do all this. You do all that, and then your boss turns up on the day and goes, rip that up, I'll write it myself. it can't inspire a great deal of confidence in yourself and in your writing and or ambition to write more like that, because you think, well, if it's not what they want, if it's not in their remit, then they'll just rip it up and write it themselves.
Just to very quickly interject, the big argument that's raged, and I think Sami Zayn's the latest to do this, but hilariously he alluded to the fact that it's just Vince's fault, guys. Clearly it is. Sami Zayn's recently alluded to it. Seth Rollins came out and said, guys, writing 5 hours of TV is hard, and I'm going to call bollocks on that, because on main roster programming, flagship programming, Raw and SmackDown runs 5 hours per week. In the year 2000, Raw was 2 hours and SmackDown was 2 hours, so that's like one less hour. And in the year 2000, Chris Kresge did such an amazing job of making it feel every single minute of it was completely unmissable. The entire roster was maximised. Headbanger Thrasher was in a more engaging role in the year 2000 than Andrade Cien Almas is in 2018. It is... Get out of my face with that take of how it's hard to write 5 hours per week when there is so much actual evidenced history that costs $9.99 a month for everybody and their dog to see, that it is a complete and utter falsehood. Do not insult my intelligence with this, Seth Rollins. You do it enough with your terrible knee selling. Do not tell me.
And you're adding in your promos. I hate Seth Rollins.
The comment section's going to hate us.
Well, that's fine, because he's really bad.
He's not really bad. He's just inconsistent. He could be really good.
Well, let us know what changes you'd like to see WWE make in 2019 in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on iTunes or Spotify for daily podcasts. My thanks to Michael Sidgwick and to Andy Murray. Thank you for watching or listening, and we will see you soon.